So today I was my introduction of being oriented.
And how'd it go?
Good. I My nervous system feels good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, there is actually something to it. I
yeah,
I
it
like his I mean, the thing that I was drawn to with working with Charlie, because you can shop and shop and shop different coaches, and they all have like some background foundation of like where they coach from, or I don't know, whatever it's called, therapy or counsel or whatever. And so I didn't know any of this, but his like foundation or background is the OI model, organic intelligence, right?
huh.
And so OI is kind of the thought of like your body knows before you do.
Hmm.
And yeah, orienting, I mean, it can help with trauma, stress, whatever. But basically help your nervous system get, it's kind of like that fight or flight um, response. And in the wild, I think the OI kind of gives this example of like in the wild, you have that, oh no, I'm about to be dinner, and you run, you have all that adrenaline dump, and then you get to safety, and then you come back down and you go back to grazing, and you're not like freaking out looking over your shoulder every 2 seconds thinking, oh, I'm going to get eaten by a lion. Your nervous system just goes, oh no, I'm safe now, and it backs down again, right? But
Yeah.
but humans, we get stuck there.
Yeah.
And so sometimes orienting helps you get over that threshold, and like you don't have to, I don't know, if you like have water trauma and you're on dry land and you think you're going to drown, it's like, well, that's not very oriented to reality, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're not going to drown on dry land. So
Yeah.
what was that like? What did you guys do? Does he like close your eyes and he kind of gives you one of these and
I didn't close my eyes. He's just like, look around, look at your surroundings. I'm like, okay, just what do you feel? What just your hands are touching something. What does that feel like? How do you feel? Do you feel calm? What of the five senses, what sense was strongest or most pleasant?
yeah.
And so, yeah, it was cool. I was like, well, listening to you talk, I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm a grazer. I need to be chased by a lion because I don't have that.
The
I don't
fighter.
have the flight response very often.
No.
So,
Well, and then yeah, he's like you oscillate. You want your system to go back and forth like, "Oh, what am I stressed about? What's reality?"
yeah.
And then it kind of like eventually, I think for me, it kind of connects you to your current reality instead of living in some perceived threat or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Well, yeah, it was cool. And then I told him that I had been cold plunging. Now I haven't cold plunged for a week, but it's 40 here right now. I'm like, but I also listened to Tony Robbins today, and he's like, you can't negotiate with yourself.
Mm,
Like, are you going to do this? You just have to go do it.
yeah.
And you have to, it's part of a discipline. And yeah, you don't negotiate with yourself. And I'm like,
So it's
dang it.
not an option, is that the thought?
Yeah, basically, like, you're training yourself. So if you're like, "Oh, that's hard, that's" and then you're giving yourself the option to opt out, then
Mhm.
you're gonna do that in other things, and then you're basically training I get it Tony Robbins is basically you're always training yourself to do something. Like, you're either positively thinking or you're doing sessions of gratefulness. You're, I guess, orienting yourself
Yeah.
to, like, having a better life and being happy and depression and anxiety free. But if you negotiate with yourself, you weaken that part in you that's, needed to be strong so that you're not depressed and so that you are more happy, and so it's just like training, you
Yeah.
know?
So you're
If you
actually
don't
using your cold plunge?
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
you were cold plunging when you were out here, but it wasn't as
Yeah.
cold as what you're doing probably.
Yeah, dude, I went in it when it was 45 degrees. I was like,
What was
you
it
know,
here when you were going in my pool? Like
like
59?
59.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when we got back here, Wes set it back he set it up, like, a week later, and I got in there, and it was, like, also 59, and then as the weather got colder, it would creep down. And Wes, he's I don't he's a badass on so many things, so I can sit in a cold plunge for 15, 20 minutes, like, no problem, and then he gets in and he's like, "I'm out!" 30 seconds later, he's just like I'm like, "Come on, don't be a wuss, get in there." But I'm like, it's not his thing, but he is trying, he's working on it, and, yeah, but I think doing triathlons, I've swam in some really cold water for a long time,
Yeah, but you
so
get to wear wetsuits, right?
yeah, but when I did Arizona Ironman,
Yeah.
it was 57 degrees, and I swam in that for an hour and a half.
Was that
So
the one
I
I
was
drove out in Southern?
no, that was the half.
I was gonna say that was hot.
Yeah, that was hot. That
Okay.
water, I don't even remember what it was. I still wore a wetsuit then, I think.
Yeah, isn't there a rule though? It has to be under a certain
Less
temperature.
yeah, less than 76 degrees. So
Oh, that's pretty
it must have
warm.
been less than that. It was probably like exactly 76 degrees,
Yeah.
probably. But yeah, it was so cold. I couldn't like move my hands or my feet or yeah, it
For how
was
long?
probably well, I was in that water for an hour and a half,
That's insane.
2.4 miles.
Yeah. Oh, this was for a
So,
full.
yeah,
One,
that was
how
for
many
a
full
full
attempts do you have?
2.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for my 3rd one's a charm, but, my 2nd marriage is a charm, so I'm like, "Well, do I stop?" I can't apply that rule of 3 to marriage,
No.
so I just wanted to let you know that.
That's awesome. Um,
Your rule of 3s.
my rule of threes. Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, this episode is brought to you by Tea. We're not sponsored by them at all. We're not
What tea is that?
Tea. Have you done the Element?
No,
It's like the salted water.
that's just salted water. That's not tea.
No, yeah, it's called LMNT, and I always spell the whole thing out when I say it. I think it's just Element is how people say it, but it's been a game changer.
So it's not tea.
No, it's not tea,
It's
no.
just salty water.
It's salty water, no dodgy stuff is what they like to say, yeah, and
Wait,
it has,
you
like, a
actually
little
have
feet.
to buy a product for salt? I just put a pinch of, I think it's
Well,
called Celtic
just
salt.
it's called what?
Celtic?
Oh, Celtic salt?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have a subscription, and I have watermelon salt and orange salt, and it's got potassium in it, and
That's just crazy. So they can sell just about anything then. So you can get
they
your own
can
salt but they sell it in these little packages, probably pre-measured and
yeah,
flavored and make you feel like
yeah,
you're doing something.
yeah, but no dodgy stuff. There's no, like, sugar, fake stuff, there's no fake crap in it, so, yeah, it was speaking of Iron Man, it definitely was a game changer because you get dehydrated out there.
Oh
So,
yeah.
like, your running journey so it's interesting, right? Like, sports, endurance sports, business, you kinda use the same muscles a little bit, like, maybe not so much physically, but mentally, right? Like, but
They
you
cross
have
over for sure.
yeah, but you have to have the right, I think, nutrition, so to speak, to be able to make it. So, yeah, I don't know. When I find a good product, I'm like, "Sold," and then I'm a sneezer, right? So I tell everybody, and,
You're a pusher.
I'm a pusher. Yeah.
What a sneezer? Is that like a marketing term? Is that
Yeah,
that guy Seth?
Seth Godin.
Uh-huh.
Seth Godin is kinda like yeah, I'm his fan right now, so, yeah, I'm
Uh,
a sneezer. Mom's on it. I sneezed on mom.
yeah.
She's using it,
So
so
you got at least one other person. I'm definitely not going to be using it, especially since it's not an official sponsor. So
Well, that's too bad, but that's fine. You're doing your Celtic salt and whatnot, so, yeah.
yeah,
Did you do anything like that when I first got you into running the La Jolla half?
No, because the group of guys that I started training with, and I had no distance running experience, they were all like unsupported runs, right? So you don't take any nutrition or hydration, and you just go run 14, 15 miles.
Yeah.
So,
When you told me that, I thought you guys were crazy. Like, I don't even go on a 3-mile run without a little hand water bottle. Like, I will die if I don't have water on me. So I just thought that, and then I heard stories of you guys, like, finding random water bottles and, like, drinking out of them. I was like, "What?"
yeah, we were
Barbaric.
we were dying once and just looking for anything, and one of the guys was like found a water bottle in like a dirt parking lot and drank it. I was like, "No, thank you." And then, we're always like, maybe if we see a drinking fountain somewhere, we'll stop. But we did this, I think it was the first time I'd ever run over 20 miles. And somewhere around mile 14, I knew I was in trouble. And I was just like, we need water. And so we added an extra mile loop to run over to this park that somebody knew of because it had a drinking fountain. And then
Yeah.
occasionally somebody would think ahead and bring their credit card with them or something and run into a 7-Eleven, mile 12 or 14 and grab a Gatorade or something. But no, I mean, to them, it was like anything under 13 miles, you didn't need support. You're just going to go out and run 13 miles. You'll be right back. You know?
You'll be right back.
Yeah, and because I
Uh,
did so many years training like that, and then I'd get to a race and they'd be handing out water every 2 or 3 miles, and I'm like, "Oh, look at this. This is awesome." And then I'd feel bloated and heavy, and I felt horrible. And it finally, I think it was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 half marathons in, I'm like, I typically don't drink water for the first 12 to 14 miles. I'm not going to take any aid stations until I absolutely have to. And I think I took the last one a mile 12, and that was my PR.
wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
so
Well, I think you train, you run your race like you train, right?
right.
So if you're used to just being dehydrated all the time.
Well, are you really dehydrated though? Like you drink so much water throughout the day in any given day,
Yeah.
you're not at real risk of being dehydrated. I don't think, at least not for a half marathon. Now, a
Yeah.
full, for sure, you can
Yeah.
be in a bad way, but I don't think you need calories on a full. I think I kept trying to, both my fulls, I didn't train with nutrition, and then on race day I ate nutrition, during the run, and I just felt awful. Felt like a brick was
Yeah.
in my stomach. So I feel like, again, if I were to do another full, I think I would do hydration, but not nutrition.
Yeah. Like liquid nutrition or like solid nutrition? Like, are you
Solid.
talking like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm with you. I'll do liquid nutrition, right? For calories and carbs and
Sure.
all that. But yeah, well, someone like me's out there for a long time, so I have to have nutrition.
Yeah, you might
You
die.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might die. But yeah, if you're gonna do it sub 4, sub 5, sub whatever, sub what I do, you don't need it, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So would you, this is with Ken, right?
Yeah.
Would you guys, what would you talk about? Did you talk about, because he was your business mentor too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the conversation was always different depending on the dynamic of whoever showed up that day. It was kind of like any given Sunday. You never knew who you were going to get and what kind of run you were going to do, but you knew you were going to go far. And
In a cotton shirt too. I just
yeah, but I'm not a
some
gear
Hanes
guy.
socks and some cotton shirts, yeah.
I'm not a
But
gear guy. I still
yeah,
run in cotton. I don't
yeah.
care. I'm not a believer in, I know that I've seen the bloody nipples. I know people need something else, but
Your nipples are tough.
my
They're like,
nipples,
"I
I
don't
mean,
bleed."
I guess I was blessed with leather nipples, genetics.
Thanks, Dad.
But no, I mean, it kind of felt like, sometimes you'd show up just all business and it was like truth serum though. Somewhere along the run, you'd be so depleted, you'd be so out of gas. You kind of felt like if you got interrogated, you would like give up all the top secret codes and you would just say whatever came to mind. And so that was what was kind of fun is you'd get deep into the miles and you'd be able to kind of get somewhere honest. Eh,
Yeah. Do you remember, like, a conversation off the
I
top of
mean,
your
we
head?
ran
Like
for like a decade and I feel like there were so many good conversations, but I think that was the just overall sense, the feel was it felt it felt pretty raw and it was almost like addictive in a way because
yeah,
you're so depleted, you don't have any more of those pretenses.
yeah.
And and then we'd always hang out in jacuzzi afterwards and eat a bunch of food and replenish. So we didn't do any nutrition or hydration on the run, but we'd do plenty for the next 2 hours afterwards.
Yeah, didn't you tell me you, like, gained weight training?
It was like
You're like
without fail. Without fail. I'm like, "Oh, I'm training for a marathon. I'm for sure gonna lose weight." I'd put on like 5 to 8 pounds every time. I don't know. I swear it was my body going into survival mode thinking like, "Okay, you're trying to kill us. We're gonna hang on to all the calories we can." But
Yeah,
I mostly think that it was just I took it as a license to eat.
yeah,
I was like, "I'm burning 4,000, 5,000 calories a day, and I can eat whatever I want." And then I'd go eat 6,000. So
yeah.
it doesn't help when you're in a surplus, you know.
Right. You're like, "I gotta go run this off again."
Yeah, I'd like to
Oh,
say it was
yeah.
probably muscle mass and all these other things, but no, it was just a surplus. I,
Well, muscle weighs more than fat, right? I mean,
sure, but
that's what they say.
when you finish your run and then you go eat like two taco shop burritos that are like 1,500 calories a piece, you're
Yeah,
gonna put on weight. So
yeah,
I,
yeah,
it was surprising to me back then, but it shouldn't be a surprise now. That
yeah,
like I know I was in a surplus. If I wanted to shed, I needed to be in a deficit, but it was just like your body just craved everything.
yeah.
So I mean, we were doing I think the heaviest week I had, and I know there's guys that do way more, but I had a 50-mile or 53-mile week. I had, we were doing 120, 140-mile months pretty regularly. So,
Wow.
you figure, hey, you're just going to burn. You can
Yeah,
do whatever you want with the food.
yeah,
But yeah, we didn't train with it. But we definitely consumed it afterwards. But yeah, I think that was just a really cool season of, challenges, a great season of like having somebody that's further down the road in business be able to see something I hadn't seen yet. He
yeah,
he could hear what I was going through with the business and be like, "This is what you might want to try." And he was pretty much always right about it. And
wow.
really, I mean, I think he's responsible for a lot of the growth in the business and me pushing outside of my comfort zone. So,
Yeah.
so it was pretty cool. And I got to do a bunch of half marathons and two fulls. So I did one of the fulls after he passed. But yeah, it was. I'm not in half shape now. I can tell you that much.
So, yeah. So, how did you meet Ken? Was it because you rented a space from him or like
No, there was a group of guys that they were running together long before, and one of the guys is a friend of mine. And when I told him that you signed me up for a half, and I had never run more than 6 miles in my life, he's like, "You got to come out. There's a running group. We run every Saturday and Sunday. Just show up and see how you like it. Otherwise, basically, he's like, we can help get you in shape for your first half."
so if I had not signed you up, you would have never met Ken.
Probably so.
Oh
No,
my
I'm
god.
sure. I'm sure.
No.
I mean, Andrew was running with him for a couple years prior, and
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was a good excuse. Is like get involved in the distance running again. never running more than 6 miles, and the very first run I went out with them, I think we did 8 or 9.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I was capable of that, and
Yeah.
that first run, he had to kinda there was, I think, 5 guys on that run, and I think 3 of them were, like, wanted nothing to do with waiting for me,
Yeah.
and Ken was the guy that was like, "Yeah, no, let's run together. We'll get you through this." And I'm like,
Aw.
on mile 4, I'm like, "I'm out of gas. I don't and there's no car.
Right?
We gotta get back somehow.
Almost to El Centro,
Yeah,
like,
can we Uber? Do something?" Actually, I think this was before Uber. When was Uber?
I don't even know. They probably got invented because of runners,
Trent, can
like
you find out when Uber was? Because
yeah.
the first run I went on was in 2011. I'm sure Uber was around in 2011. But you know how things are become widespread,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Well,
then
cell phones weren't even a big
2009.
2009?
Yep, there you
Oh,
go.
wow.
So for sure it wasn't widespread though. It wasn't like
Yeah.
everybody has the app and has done it. I don't think I took my first Uber ride until 2013.
Yeah. Was it during a run?
No.
Okay.
No.
So
Actually, I think we were on vacation and we had a trailer and or an RV, and we
yeah.
didn't have a tow car,
Oh,
and we didn't rent a car. And so we got to where we were going, and the way we got around was Uber.
yeah.
It was
I thought that was really interesting that you said that time of life and Ken made you realize that you were capable of more than you thought you were. I think that's really cool. Like I've found that like in my fitness journey, which didn't even start until like my mid 30s. I was like, I had no idea what I was capable of, like physically, mentally, professionally, all of it. So I feel like, yeah, doing stuff like that unlocks
Oh yeah. Well,
a
I thought
whole
that's
lot
what
of opportunity.
yeah, I thought that's what you were kind of referencing when you were saying there's like this crossover. I feel like
Yeah.
running requires discipline,
Yep.
and that discipline starts to bleed into all these other areas in your life.
Yeah.
And one of the big ones was business. Like just that ability to push through hard seasons.
Yeah.
It takes that same perseverance and drive when you're on a hard run.
Yeah.
And I found that to be true in a lot of areas of life. Like if you got a project or you got, a challenging season that you're in, you kind of draw from that inner strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's super
Yeah.
cool.
It is super cool. Yeah. I think I, when I started running in my 30s, because actually it was like I started running first and foremost. Like, and I was never really a runner.
Mhm.
I was not a fitness person. And then I think I started running because I was running away from my problems. I wanted
Yeah.
I can run really fast away from my problems. And then, yeah, I think that gave me a lot of strength. And then I started discovering triathlon. Like I've always loved biking or cycling. And somehow it's easier running after cycling far. I don't know why.
That
But
sounds the opposite of what I would believe to be true. I feel like my legs would
yeah,
be jello.
yeah, you should try it. I feel like, this is, 2025, you
I
you don't know what you're capable of. But no,
Sure.
I think swimming and yeah, running and biking, it's just it's cool, and it's being outdoors. So,
Yeah.
I think there's something to, like, being outside and being in nature and appreciating how strong your body can be and
Yeah.
how far it can go. So,
Well, yeah, I grew up running with dad, but it was always like short distances.
yeah.
It was like 2, 3 miles. Um, I remember the first 10K I did, I was 10 years old. And
Wow.
or maybe I was 9 about to turn 10. It was in Coronado, it was all flat.
Mhm.
And that was the last time I ran 6 miles too. It was like that.
When you were 10, that was your
That was it.
your longest
That
distance?
was it, and then from then on, it was like, maybe I'd do 3 or 4 here or there,
Yeah.
but I was always running, but it was always short distance, and, yeah, I just remember running in the old neighborhood and, you know, we'd run at night, and he'd always say, "Pick up some rocks," because there was always these dogs that would end up chasing us, and so
Oh,
we'd
yeah.
run with rocks in our hands in case you had
Oh.
to throw them at a dog that was chasing you. And every run ended with that giant hill to get back up into our neighborhood.
Oh, which one?
Melrose.
Yeah.
It's almost a mile long hill. You're like, great to get. And so it's like we'd run down the hill. You're at a
Yeah.
mile. You'd run a mile round a block somewhere or whatever, and then you'd come back up the hill. And it was like, yeah. But that was kind of a great foundation as far as like a love of running. But like you're
Mhm.
saying, to tap into pushing yourself outside of what you think is even possible. And yeah, I think that's a pretty cool thing with the triathlons that you do. But for me, I've never swam any distance
Oh. Oh,
ever.
really?
Well, I surf,
Yeah, that's true.
a lot of paddling, but I'm not like just gonna go out for a 2 mile swim. That sounds insane.
Yeah. It can be insane, but yeah, it's very meditative and it is a mind game. Like, I really have to overcome a lot when I'm swimming because there's a lot of unknowns in the water. I've swam in the Brazos in Waco, Texas, and apparently there's alligators. I didn't know that, so I think I woulda swam a lot faster,
Yeah,
but, your mind can make you fail if you don't conquer it or if you don't figure out a way to, like, play a game with yourself to get you through it,
right.
and yeah, so and each swim that I've done, it just puts more in the tank of confidence, like, "Okay, I can do that. I can do a hard, scary, unknown kinda water situation and make it out alive." And then
Yeah,
go on to do, a bike and a run,
right.
but
Do you feel like you've drawn from that in other situations outside
oh,
of
f yeah, for
endurance?
sure,
Yeah.
for sure. So, I started running in 2008, no, was it 2008? 2009. Did my first half in 11, and I think I did my first triathlon the same year. Because actually I did sorry, my first full, I think, was 11 or 12, is the San Diego Rock and Roll. And then I moved to Kansas, and I felt like, "I can't run here. It's cold, it's windy, it's whatever." So I had to learn a whole new way of getting outside because I had just come from Arizona, and Arizona is just, like, beautiful. You can run all the time, except summer. But I was, like, Fort Huachuca area, so it's high desert, so
Mhm.
it doesn't get as bad as Phoenix. But, yeah, just having to relearn Kansas, running in Kansas, and then my life pivoted, and I think having that base of challenging runs and races really gave me the courage to, I guess, like, continue on with the pivot, right? Because you can pivot, but you can go back.
Right.
And so I think it really helped me to be open and to be like, "Okay, I've never done this before, but I bet I can do it, and I bet I can be great at it."
Mhm.
So, it definitely helped me. And it kept me from drinking too much and then other bad habits that you do. It kept me off the streets, and in a way, it still does. So,
Right.
yeah, it helped me in business just yeah, because you have to be disciplined and you have to manage your time, and I think in business and training, it's like time management is essential to being successful.
Yeah.
Um, or at least it's a foundation, I think, of success.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think about like with running, the thing that's unique about it is when it gets hard and uncomfortable and challenging and all of that, all you have to do is stop.
yeah,
And but you don't, right? And
right.
I think for me that served me so well in starting and growing my business is like there are so many times where the world is telling you to quit
Yeah.
and telling you to stop, and you're the only thing between failure and success is like your mental state. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to close up shop and quit. So, it's like just that moment you stop your run and you're like, no, I can keep going. And you actually do.
Yeah.
It's that same feeling, that same pushing through that wall. And I feel like dozens of times I've been in that position with my business where it gets really hard. I mean, everybody just assumes if you're running a successful company, they assume it's easy, or, you don't go through any struggles any longer. And they don't really acknowledge the ones you go through early on.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it a lot, but like, yeah, making payroll is a stressor and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, there's times where you go through and you think like all of your efforts seem to amount to nothing. Like you don't see an immediate cause and effect growth. And then you kind of feel like you have to hide that because everybody goes, oh, you're in business for yourself. You're a business owner. You must be rich or you must be successful or whatever. And it's like, so part of you feels like you can't even tell people how hard it is
Yeah.
and how much you're struggling and how it's going to take a decade before you even experience any real meaningful success in it. And then even at that, like they're always going to compare you. Like, you hit your first $1 million year or whatever, and then they go, well, what about that company that's doing 10 million? And then you had that, and then you're always going to find somebody that makes you feel like you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about race or running is like you're racing against yourself, really. You're not, I mean, unless you get to an elite level, then yes, you're racing somebody else. But usually you're racing your last time, your PR, what you're capable
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
And I think business is a lot like that too. Is like I'm not competing directly with another business or some end goal. It's like, can I do more than what I thought I can do?
Yeah. I would say 99% of the time. And yeah, and success looks different at every different level, right? It's like you're saying that one time you make your first million, you're like, that's success. Well, if you did a million for 10 years, maybe that doesn't look like success anymore, right? So, yeah, I think the parameters of success changes and you evolve and business is hard cuz it's like a wheel and there's spokes, right? So it's like if one spoke's working, one's broken, right? So it's like the people spoke is the one that's loose. So you got to address that one and then it's the whatever, I guess fill in the blank, but
Yeah.
it's
It's
just like
constantly weak point training.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the wheel's going around, but it's just there's always something to address,
Yeah.
tighten, fine tune,
Yeah.
and
It's a never
yeah,
ending pursuit. I think that's the
yep,
other fun thing about running is you can never stop improving too. But yeah, it's funny you say like the image of success. It's like I remember on our street growing up, there was like 3 or 4 contractors on our street. And our dad was a banker, so he was always looking at, he was an SBA, small, in the small business. So he'd look and he'd see like, oh, you wait, watch. I forget who it was, but it was like when business was good, you'd see all the toys show up. He'd buy all the stuff,
yeah.
and then business would be bad, and he'd be selling everything. You remember that? And it was just like there was one house that was he lived up the street and he bought the one house down by ours and then ended up losing it because he was always doing projects. He was always doing
Yeah,
additions.
yeah,
And you could always tell when work was good, there's the toys. And it's just like, it was so silly to watch the financial habits that a lot of small business owners have. They don't have the discipline to, I guess, have deferred gratification. They want
yeah,
that success so badly
yeah,
that they jump prematurely out before they actually have that like financial health and stability. And I
Yeah.
just remember watching so many contractors do that, where it's like, yeah, you got one good contractor, you had one good year, but you have there's volatility in the market, there's ups and downs, and you need to have I guess that margin in your life. And so I don't know. To me that's one example that I've seen over and over of small business owners and contractors specifically that you can just see. You're like, oh, they're about to go broke because they just bought a bunch of toys. There's the boat and the RV and the motorcycle and the new car and the lifted truck. And then, the next year you're like, oh, why is there a for sale sign on everything?
Yeah. You gotta store away your nuts for a harsh winter, right? I mean, it's like the squirrels do, right?
For
So,
sure.
that's interesting that you look back and you remember that about our neighborhood.
Yeah, there was one guy
Right.
that did it right though. I don't know if you remember him. And he did a beautiful addition. He had this really nice house on the little side street off of Melrose, and he did, beautiful addition, remodeled their whole house, and he never had that ebb and flow. He was always just this slow build.
Hmm.
And, I compare it to some of the other guys where it was literally, we were there for 17 years, and you could see these cycles, and he just was always getting better and improving. And it's funny because we ended up building that art studio for our old neighbor,
Mhm. She's
and
the best.
he came down and looked at it and gave us some high praise on how clean and
Aw.
amazing the job was. He's retired, contractor. I think he's retired. Um,
Never retired. Can you imagine yourself being retired? I can't. You're gonna be tinkering and building and
yeah, probably not. But I mean, as far as like pushing as hard as we do now,
yeah, I gotcha. Yeah,
but
that was nice that he came down and gave you some kudos.
yeah, some praise. But yeah, I remember he had he bought his wife a Mercedes, and he had the nice truck, and would go
Yeah,
out on his tuna boat fishing. And I'm just like, okay, he's doing it. It's not
yeah,
pretend. He's actually, he did it slowly,
yeah,
and it's sticking.
yeah,
I think that discipline too is like, yes, looking hard times in business in the eye and saying, I'm not going to stop, I'm going to keep going. And then not getting frustrated and prematurely claiming success.
yeah,
And being more, I guess, you hear people talk about being process oriented rather than destination, right? Just enjoy the journey type of a
yeah,
thing. Um,
yeah,
yeah. So I could see the guys that were in a hurry to be successful, and then the guy that kind of like did it slow, and I'm like, oh, okay, that stuck out to me. Um, and then just kind of seeing how um, a reputation is built that same way. Your stability of your company, you're not like taking a job before you can because you're chasing money all the time.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that discipline in training translates to all these areas where you just don't that you feel that breaking point, and you have what it takes to push through it.
yeah,
Right? Isn't that the whole goal of training, is like to get to that breaking point and know you can overcome it?
yeah. Well, I had 2 failed full Ironman attempts,
Yeah.
so I I did
They
not.
happen. I
Yeah, and yeah, well, yeah, they do happen, and I think, it was interesting to fail because whenever you do a race or whatever you do, like, that's always a fear, right?
Mhm.
What happens if you fail? You don't wanna fail, and then you fail, and it's, "Okay, how do I go on?" No, I think, well, you kinda do, like, a after action review, like, "Okay, well, why did that happen?" Well, I know why it happened. I did something too soon after having an injury, and, um, the other one, I got in a bike crash. So there's sometimes uncontrollable variables that
Yeah.
make you fail, you know? And I probably the first one I shouldn't have done because I was recovering from a pretty big injury, so I
Right.
shouldn't have done that. But yeah, I think I was not patient, and that showed.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I think success usually comes from the patience of it. But the fact that you did multiple attempts, I mean, getting up and trying again, I would argue that that's not necessarily failure. You're still coming back, you know?
yeah, well, yeah, I have yet to come back. I have to the bike is gathering dust, but, yeah, I will. I think
Mhm.
life is a different season right now too, to try again, but it's definitely unfinished business.
Right.
Like, I don't I'm gonna do one, I know. I'll cross that finish line, I know, and I've also had to get a couple wins under my belt too, so I went back and did some shorter distances and crossed some finish lines and, you know,
Yeah, full is as hard as it
suckered our
gets.
sister into doing it with me, and
Yeah, what'd you do, a
so
half?
what's that?
What'd you do, a half?
Janice?
Yeah.
Yeah, she did a half.
Yeah, you did it too, right?
Yeah, I did it too.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, that's still a lot. What is that, 70.3?
70.3, yeah. Yeah, and no matter the distance, really, there's always gonna be challenges.
Yeah.
Like, a 5K, if I haven't done anything for a while, a 5K is gonna feel challenging, or it
I
depends
lo
if the 5K is in a snowstorm in Colorado at elevation of 7,000 feet. It's gonna feel challenging, but
Yep, totally. Um, yeah,
so
well, I was kinda thinking about it the other day, just that idea of what it takes to make it as a small business owner, and the the parallel that you kinda brought up as far as the physical training kinda develops mental training, mental strength, um, and just the patience, and just 'cause I was talking to another small business owner that's just starting out. He's, I think, a year or two in, and just going through all those learning, growing pains, and
mhm.
it just kind of made me reminisce of like almost 18 years ago. Starting on this journey, and not you don't know what you don't know. You just start going down the path, and all that it takes to succeed and stay in the fight, kind of like you're not out of it until you are actually down and out, right? Like, if you so long as you keep picking yourself up from the mistakes, from the lump, you take your lumps. Yeah, just I don't know why I was remembering how, I mean, even just the evolution of growing, what types of projects we do. When I first
Mhm.
started out, it was like very small remodels, and it's all the capacity I had to remodel a bathroom or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
I didn't have the working capital, the operating capital to cash flow a job of any size. That's something a lot of people don't think about. It's like the bigger jobs you take on, the more broke you are because you have cash going out, and the more you're growing, the more cash you're spending, and so a growing business is a broke business,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so you're like, I
Yes.
don't understand. I'm growing, and I'm broke, and so I just remember kind of living there for a lot of years and being like,
Yeah.
how am I ever going to get to the point where I can take on a room addition, and then a new build, and then multifamily? You kind of you, it's hard to imagine
Yeah.
because of all of these obstacles. I think a lot of people just assume, oh, you're a contractor, all you guys do all the same size projects, all you guys have the same capability, the same resources, and it's like, no, you have to earn. Like, I wouldn't build a skyscraper right now.
Yeah.
It'd probably kill me. It would definitely put me out of business for sure. Not
Yeah.
not to mention, I don't even know how to build a skyscraper. I wouldn't even know the
Yeah.
first thing, right?
A
It's
lot of
like,
engineering, a lot of engineering.
yeah, but you have to have that financial backing, that experience, and it's like this slow evolution of going from, smaller projects to more in depth, and just bit by bit, incrementally experiencing an element of a new project, and then you're kind of building on that, and the concepts, and then eventually it's like you know, building a house feels like old hat, and you're kind of like, okay, what's the next challenge? But you have to be mentally healthy enough to take that on. You have to be emotionally healthy enough to take that on. You know, as you're growing,
Yeah.
you're growing all parts of you. And then the financial piece, you have to have because we've talked about like the stability of a company,
Right.
how important that is. And
Yep.
yeah, so I was just thinking about and talking to this guy because he's like, "Oh, your business is huge." I'm like,
Aw.
I mean, comparatively, it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah, so I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember when it was a big deal to get a $10,000 contract." I was like, "Oh, this is a good one."
You're like, "I made it. I'm taking you to Ruth Chris, babe."
Yep, we
Yeah.
we did it, and but it's also kind of fun to think back that, when that was a big deal, when our
Yeah.
average
Yeah.
contract size was 10 grand,
The
and
simplicity of life back then.
yeah, and then celebrating your first $50,000 contract and your first $100,000 contract. And I mean, it, you start to grow, and I don't know, maybe you're getting desensitized, or maybe you're just getting in shape, is kind of how I view it, because then taking on a $500,000 project, all of a sudden you're like, you didn't just show up race day and start running, right? You
Right.
trained, and
Right,
that's
now.
so that's why I was kind of grateful for all of the lumps and just the process of getting here, and um just and then the continued growth, like thinking about, man, what are we going to be doing in another 10 years?
Yeah. And you're gonna look back on this self, and you're gonna be like, "Aw, aw."
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's almost like a little bit, now you've been there, done that, and you kind of know what to expect and what to
Yeah.
look for and how to
Yeah.
get ready.
Yeah.
And so now there's like an expectation, or not an assumption, but a readiness of like, yep, I know this is going to take a lot from me, but I'm ready.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you
That
can.
capacity your capacity grew,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, you can take more on, and, well, I think as long as you're alive, we're alive, you're gonna continue to grow, whether you want to or not. It's a good thing,
Yeah.
right? And, yeah, you experience, you learn, and then you have a stretch goal, and then you hit rinse and repeat,
Mm,
and then you look back and you're like, "Whoa, I've come a long ways."
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's all built on one another in each experience,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, you just don't show up to race day or triathlon or whatever, like, "Wow, I've never trained."
Yeah. Not unless you're your husband. I guess
Yeah.
he
No, he realized, yeah, I was waiting for his, aha moment of like, "Oh, yeah, I just can't show up and wing it."
Right.
'Cause he was definitely like, "Yeah, I can totally wing everything." And I'm like, "Oh, can you?"
Which he did
And
though, right? Didn't he wing a few?
he did, well, yeah, when I first met him, we started biking together, we met in a cycling group, and, he's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about training for a marathon." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I have a great training plan, I know a great one. It's in 6 months." And he's like, "No, I'm talking about, like, this weekend." And I was like, "What? No way, you're gonna die." And he did it,
Yeah.
and it was hard, and he did it, and then he was just like, "You know what? I wanna do a marathon in every state."
Hmm.
And I'm like, "Cool." So, yeah, that first year, he did a lot. And then we moved to Colorado, and the elevation and just everything was different, and he showed up to a race, thought he could wing it, and just cramped, didn't have proper shoes, hadn't trained. I think it was right after COVID or during COVID, and that was kind of his moment of like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
actually need to be prepared."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and then now he's an ultra runner, and you have to be prepared because you could die. On a 50 miler out in the middle of, a mountain range, you could die.
Yeah.
So,
For sure. And talk about nutrition. That's mandatory on that. You will become like
yeah.
dehydrated, and yeah.
Yeah, same thing on that too, like, he was getting into the 50 Ks, and was able to wing it, until he did a 50K in Georgia,
Mhm.
and he just about ran out of gas. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we all hit our walls of, "Oh, okay, we actually do need to utilize some tools or nutrition or whatever it is."
Yeah, I remember feeling that way when I was doing my first big project where I was just like, this feels like it's stretching me, and we kind of jumped a level and feeling like the preparation mattered. But to some degree, how do you know what to prepare for until you've kind of been there a little bit? I mean, it helped, like, you train
People
harder.
tell you.
Yeah.
People tell you.
You
They're like,
can
"Hey,
this is really, really
you
hard.
should drink some salt water."
Uh-huh.
No, no.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some jumping out ahead
Yeah,
examples in business too, where you get in over your head. I always say we're just stubborn enough to make it through it, though, because we're not gonna give up. But um, yeah, I think we started doing ADUs. I remember my first ADU. I didn't really think through like it being 300 feet away from the street or 400 feet away. There were certain things that I was like, oh yeah, it's just like every other project. And, you know, it's almost like a small house seemed like it was going to be easier, but they're actually, because there's not as much wiggle room and they're just a little bit more cumbersome.
yeah.
And, I think we were building for a family that was moving their mom here from Kansas.
Oh,
And I think she had been diagnosed and she was moving down here to, be here for treatment. And so built a guest house in the backyard of her kid's place, and a super cool ADU, really nice one. I think it was our first one, and I think it was like 2012 or something. So it's been 13. What is that? Yeah, 13 years ago. That sounds about
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Um,
That's
but
wow.
but just hitting all the challenges on that, and I remember she was really gracious and like working through it with us. And it's like you kind of
No.
know you're like, oh, okay, this was a stretch for
Yeah,
for us to jump out. I think it had been in business maybe 4 years at that point. Yeah, and it was funny because at the end she's like, you learned a lot on this. I mean, it turned out beautiful. She's super
yeah,
stoked, and
I
she
saw,
got a
yeah.
great deal because I had no idea. I was like, I'm gonna price it like I would a building a big house, and the economy of scale is not there. So I got eaten
Yeah.
alive,
Ooh,
and the utilities were, I think, almost like 300 or 400 feet or something like that. And I didn't even think about it. I'm like, yeah, normally utilities are really easy and, close to the street. And this is all the way in the backyard. And she's like, you lost money on this, didn't you? And I'm like, just about, yeah. I pretty much worked for free on
Oh,
that project for 6 months. I think it was 5 months, something like that.
yeah,
And it was just funny because she could tell. And I wasn't going to give up, though. I just kept showing up and, pushing through, knowing I'm like, I'm not going to have any money at the end of this thing. I'm not even going to pay for wages for myself. But I'm going to have a really great client and referral. And sure enough, their neighbor ended up building one, and it's just kind of how we got started.
yeah,
And she gave us some referrals and helped us connect with more people that were interested in building them. And I think, we ended up doing, I don't know, 2 or 3 that year and 3 or 4 the next year. And it just kind of snowballed from there. And then she ended up actually passing away. Treatment, I think she got an infection during treatment. And the kids sold, moved back to Kansas. And the new owner called and thanked us. It was only a year after that we finished, and they said, we heard that you built this. They gave us your contact information. We wanted to call you directly and say, hey, this is the best guest house we've ever seen, and that's why we bought this house.
Oh,
It was
wow.
it was a cool story. So like, little sad that,
Yeah.
the mom didn't make it, but she was so happy to be in the guest house for I think it was
For
close to
yeah.
6 months that she got to enjoy it and live there.
Oh,
And yeah. But that idea of like how painful that project was, knowing too that you're not getting paid really to do it.
well, you I bet you got paid in
Yeah.
lessons learned, their
Yeah.
weight in gold, huh?
Yeah. I don't know, there's a saying, if you're not earning, you're learning.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
that's how I
Or you
looked at
should
it.
be. You
Yeah.
should be learning.
Hopefully. And I was not earning. So I was learning a ton. Yeah.
Yeah. You're apprentice on your own project,
Well,
kinda,
yeah,
and that yeah,
a lot of growing small businesses is kind of like that self discovery. And it
yeah,
doesn't have to be. I know there's so many resources and like books and mentor programs and all these things that you can lean into. But for some reason, young people, when they start a business, they tend not to, um, especially in the trades, they tend not to go about it in a business manner,
yeah,
a business like manner. They treat it like a side job. I know, I mean, I was 27 when I started my business, and it's, I don't know, I don't know, have you ever read the E Myth?
mm-mm,
He talks about, um, when a, a small business owner starts their business, it's like because you had an entrepreneurial seizure. It's like
mhm,
you got struck by a bolt of lightning. You're like, hey, like in my example, I can swing this hammer. That means I should start a business. And it's like, well, no,
mhm,
you're a technician. You know how to build. You don't know how to run a business that builds.
yeah,
And so that's where all of the real lumps come from, is in your procedures and systems and accounting and software and estimating process and all of that. It's like you have
yeah,
no idea about any of that.
yeah,
But you're like, hey, I know how to build stuff, so I may as well. What I don't know what makes so many people think they're qualified to run a business just because you can build something. But that's exactly how I was.
well, yeah, and I think people wanna run a business because they don't wanna work for anybody else. They like the autonomy, they like there's a lot of perks about on the surface of having your own business, but yeah, you peek behind the curtain, you're like, "Whoa, that's a lot of work." What do you mean HR and accounting and marketing and everything,
Sales and
and yeah,
estimating
sales
and
and yeah, and you're responsible for it all,
yeah.
right? So it's like, yeah, all the liabilities, right? It's like assets and liabilities,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I
it's
yeah, I mean, I just know that like when you have that moment when you're like, yeah, I'm going to start a business, I know that there's ways to do research and go and get the tools to start out on the right foot. But for some
yeah,
reason, most businesses don't. They think having a passion for something is good enough to get them through. They
yeah,
think having a skill set or a talent for something is good enough to get them through. And you can feel it on the business end. The client experience feels different when you're dealing with like basically a technician turned business owner versus a business owner that provides a service or product, because
yeah,
that experience is, it's so much more tailored towards service and that customer than it is like, I just need a side job, I just need to make some money.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
kind of how the technician is. They're like, they're just trying to get paid.
yeah,
Yeah. And so I think that was kind of, um, that season for me, jumping into those bigger projects and realizing that it's gonna be all about our business systems that help us succeed, because we can build a beautiful house, but how do we do it many times over for a lot of different clients year after year? Well, that's
yeah,
systems.
yeah. Well, I think that's probably like, a number one indicator is, are you good with money? If you wanna own your own business, are you good with money?
Right.
Because it's gonna be really hard, and, you're gonna be managing a lot. So, I knew you were always good at managing money because you were my bank when I was growing up. I often had to borrow from you, and so you were always good with your money.
I'm
So,
a natural saver.
you're a natural saver, yeah.
I don't know.
You knew.
Yeah, and I like to have that that buffer,
Yeah,
and I'm also, I mean, as an entrepreneurial, it's like type person, you have to be willing to take risks,
yeah,
calculated risks, and with an intended outcome. But yeah, I feel like there's so many small businesses out there that if you peek behind the curtain, not only is the person stressed out of their mind and barely making any money, but they're probably their financials are a disaster, a mess.
yeah,
And it's kind of scary to think how many people are, partnering with companies that are just a day away from ruin. And you need that assurance that somebody is taking their fiduciary responsibility within the partnership with you
yeah,
seriously. Like
yeah,
I don't commingle funds. All of our accounting is, on a job by job basis, and it is to the penny. And partly because I'm a stickler for it, but also it's like, how else should you run somebody's project? You would want to know that it's ran clean behind the
right.
scenes, right?
Yep,
And I think thankfully, being raised by a banker, we kind of had that in our DNA almost.
yeah,
That debt can be a tool, but it's also can be a trap. So
yeah,
it can be a tool if you're investing it,
right.
into something long term that's going to pay off.
Yeah, you're leveraging it correctly.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
But I mean, I do think like if you're bad with money before you start a business, you're going to be even worse after.
Yeah,
Because when there's surplus, you're going to see it and spend it. And, like you count your chickens prematurely, then you end up spending money that's not yours.
yeah,
And if you're broke and you have bad spending habits already and you don't run your business like a tight ship, I was looking at Doge, what they're doing with this efficiency. It's like there's so much waste even within a small organization. I mean, it does not surprise me that they're going and finding tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars.
yeah,
Um, I mean, every year we focus on waste. How do we
yeah,
eliminate waste in our company?
yeah,
Um, there's cost of doing business. There's some things that you just aren't worth chasing. They're so small. The effort to chase it is more than you would be saving.
yeah,
But on jobs of size, you can always point to like where is the margin of the percentage of waste, and you got to shoot to keep that as low as possible because
yep,
the customer doesn't want you just lighting their budget on fire.
right. No, they're trusting you with their budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, your clients are, like, in good hands.
Yeah. Well, we
They're
strive to be yeah, that financial financially stable company and, fiscally responsible, and it's kind of fun to see Elon Musk stuff cuz it's like we're doing that every day on a small scale all the time, and it's
yeah,
like, yep, let's eliminate waste. Let's get rid of superfluous spending. Let's
yeah. Friday donuts, out.
well, that you can't quantify the return on morale investment on that. It's like you give a guy a donut and all of a sudden you get more production.
Yeah. He's on a sugar high, but his metabolic health is going down.
Right.
Um,
Dang it. We have to have healthy we got to have healthy employees. So, yeah, no more
yeah,
donuts.
yeah, just sugar-free donuts and yeah, kale and tofu donuts,
Yeah.
just
Well, this is
good.
kind of cool. Our first remote podcast with you
Yep,
out in Alabama.
yep,
And I can hear you really well. This is the first time I've had to have headphones on and hear myself though, so it's been a little distracting, but kind of neat that we're able to do this, and
Yeah.
hopefully the sound and lighting and all of that turns out beautiful, and we get to do it a lot more.
Yeah, this was fun. This was great.
Yeah, it worked
I
out. I
enjoyed it.
mean,
Yeah.
first time, trial run, and it seemed like it's pretty neat. I'm kind of sick of my own voice. Is this what you guys have to listen to? I'm like, dang, I would not want to have to listen to that.
Oh, well, yeah, I it's fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
We're all used to it by now,
Oh, good.
and,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
It's-
I'm sure Trent can work his magic and make this even radder.
Yep, Trent.
So, well, cool.
It's up to you now, buddy. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no pressure. Tons of pressure.
tons of pressure. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up and see how this all turns out, and then try it again next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool.
Good talk.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Luke.